Hello and welcome back to Game Develop Repeat. I'm Chris, and today we're going to be talking about a legendary computer game called Black and White. Black and White is a sort of a god game slash creature trainer. It's got a little bit of a war strategy element to it, but I think it's a huge oversimplification to call this game war strategy. The sequel is a bit more war strategy heavy. Okay, so let's just put you in the shoes of somebody playing this game. You are a floating camera, you're a god, and you're going around, you're interacting with villagers in this town. You're helping them build their town. You're kind of protecting them or kind of like forcing them to worship you, depending on how you're doing things. And you get a creature, a little pet that you're training. Imagine those old games like cats or dogs? Maybe this is a little bit of a deep cut, but there were these very casual games that were like, oh, you can't have a pet. Here's a pet on your computer, and you can like pet the cat and it'll be happy. Or maybe like a Tamagotchi kind of a thing, right? Um, the creature training is kind of like if you had a Tamagotchi, except sometimes it flings its own poo at your villagers. And then you try to punish it for doing that, but through some miscommunication, it goes, oh, okay, so I should do that more then. All right, I'll keep doing that. Or maybe it's angry at you and it knows that you're going to get, like, it knows that you're going to get upset if it does it, but it's like rebelling. So then it starts doing it. The AI is fascinating. It's really interesting, and that is a huge mechanic in the game. Is you're trying to train this creature so that it's useful to you, and it can go like inspire villagers or like take care of them when you're doing other stuff or whatever, right? Help convert other little villages. Like he can be your ambassador. He or she can be your ambassador to other towns and can be kind of like a giant soldier against enemy gods. There are multiple gods in this game. It's kind of there's a battle of the gods thing going on. There is multiplayer, by the way. I don't know if there's any way to make that work anymore. Maybe over the LAN. Um, it is a marvelous game. It has its flaws. The tutorial is one of the longest just so much tutorial, and it's so clunky now to go through it. The first time you ever go through it, you're like, oh, okay, I kind of need this, but then there's no way to skip it, so you just have this like 2 hour tutorial teaching you like basic like mouse navigation stuff. And it makes sense because at the time this was a very unique thing, and it kind of still is. um but man, the tutorials are hefty. They keep me from going back to that game. The other thing that keeps me from going back to that game is it is almost inaccessible. I do not know how to play this game in 2023. I have no idea how to get access to it if you don't already own a copy of it, like a physical copy. And even with a physical copy, it's still like you got to deal with the interactions of old technology with new operating systems. So there's a lot of struggle there, but it is 100% worth looking into the gameplay and at least trying to understand what's going on here. In terms of like the the charm of this game, a lot of it is coming from the creature for me. That's huge. Oh, they've got like this little like martial arts like combat thing where you can fight an enemy creature and you can like duck and dodge and punch and kick and all this stuff, and it's kind of cool. It's a little clunky, but it's pretty cool. That's generally my review of Black and White. It's a little clunky, but it's really cool. I think almost everything in this game has a little bit of jank to it. Like it's a little bit just everything's just a little bit wrong, but it all comes together to be an amazing experience. It's extremely charming. The villagers are designed to be just annoying enough that you think, maybe maybe I should just be evil. Maybe I should just be a bad god. And this is the other key charm of the game is you can be good or evil. Your villagers are going to follow you either way. You can scare them into following you, or you can inspire them into following you with kindness and joy and whatnot. Um, and if you're evil, okay, this is where this game absolutely shines, in my opinion. This is crazy. You want to get mana, basically. You want to get power from your worshippers worshiping you. You can do this by waiting for them to continue worshiping and dancing and doing this and doing all these rituals and all this stuff. Or you can do sacrifices. I am astounded at how well Black and White makes you feel completely fine with sacrificing children. This game is it does such a good job of making all your little peasant dudes feel like little ants. Like you're just like, "Oh, whatever. It's just a little peasant dude. It doesn't matter. I can do whatever I want to them. I have full control over them. Like I can assign jobs to them. I can do this and I can sacrifice them if I want. They're just a resource, whatever." It's wild. It really can put you in this mindset of like, well, it's just you get so much mana and power for sacrificing a child. So like why not? Right? So then if you're playing a good guy, you can like sacrifice trees, like you can just focus on having them worship you and all this stuff, but they make it so convenient to be evil. Like it's shocking how convenient it is to be evil. And I swear, I like learned a couple things about my own human nature playing that game. It was like, oh, if you just view people as resources, suddenly nothing matters. This explains a lot of problems that happen in the world. You know, if you start viewing things as statistics and resources and completely disconnecting yourself from the humanity of it, then whatever. Um, and it's not like the other peasants aren't unhappy about it. Like the game does make you feel like they are like real to some extent. Like it gives them some personality, but it also makes them just annoying enough and like it's great. There's one quest where these guys are like begging you to build them a boat and they're like, "Hey, we only want one more thing. Just help us with this one thing, and then we'll be off. We'll be on our way." And then you help them with the one thing, and they're like, "Hey, we got to thinking, and we need another thing." And they do it all in these really annoying little songs. It's beautiful. It's amazing. Other element of this game is it kind of takes into account choices that you might make just because you're fed up with something. So like if one of these quests is annoying you, you can like drop a rock on the quest giver's house or you can kill the quest giver or whatever. And it doesn't break the game. It just it just rolls with the punches. It's just like the ultimate improv partner. It's like, "Oh, okay. No big deal. Here's that quest giver's sibling," or it's like, "Oh, no big deal, that quest is just over, but here's who like concludes it for you." Like, you congratulations, you took a shortcut through this quest. They no longer want the thing they wanted because they've seen your righteous wrath and they're like feeling bad about begging you for this thing and like, "Oh, okay, cool. Instead we're just gonna worship you anyway because we're terrified of you." Like there's cool pivots. There's different conclusions to each quest. Um, the campaign is kind of long, in my opinion. The game generally plays a little slowly because you're trying to get control of everything happening. You're like a very clumsy god. There's so many times where you just like accidentally chuck a rock into one of your buildings or something. Like it doesn't sound like that would happen. Happens all the time. The spellcasting system involves moving the mouse in certain patterns, which is like pretty rough design wise, but as far as the game, it's kind of good because it gets rid of a lot of menus and stuff, which I love, and it works perfectly for the like the vibe of the game. So that's really nice actually, even though the mouse gestures are kind of a nightmare. There's different leashes for your creature that make it act nice or aggressive or help train it to do certain behaviors. The creatures are like oddly cute. Oh, as you become more evil or more good, I want to mention this. There are changes to your temple that are fantastic. Like the evil temple looks so cool. It gets all these spikes, the like legs of the temple. The temple has like a sprawling base, right? Like it's got like these six like kind of leg supports going out across the ground. Um, the legs of it start to like curl in a way that kind of looks like horns. It's beautiful. It's great. And the Holy Temple has its own whole aesthetic. I'm going to be honest. I played Evil a lot because I was a kid. I was kind of lazy with it. And I was like, well, I don't want to figure out how to get these guys to worship enough. I'm just just gonna uh have a lot of child sacrifice, um, which, is maybe not the best way to play the game, but before I'd ever played Black and White, I had played like Dungeon Keeper. So in my mind, we're going evil. That's the way it's good to be bad, right? Isn't that like the Dungeon Keeper slogan? Yeah, so huge fan of this game. I only wish, and I'm sorry for talking so much about how great it is in a way that might make you curious about it, because I don't have a way for you to play it. I can't point you to it. I can tell you that NoClip, NOCLIP, NoClip did a nice little set of documentaries on it. Not like full deep dives like they usually do, but I think one of them is a full deep dive, and then they have like a video of them just playing it and kind of like getting accustomed to it. So there's definitely footage out there that you can check out. You can learn more about it there. But as far as I think they talk about how to play it, but they're also in the like, wow, there's really not many ways to play it. They did like all the like fan patches and mods and stuff. I've never even gone down that rabbit hole. I think last time I tried to play it, I had the good luck of it working for me, and then I just didn't get past the tutorial. Oh, the creature choices are cute, by the way. You can choose like yeah, we're gonna have to talk about the AI of these creatures, but you can choose like a monkey, a cow, or like a what is it, a sheep maybe? Was it a sheep? And then there's also there's like secret creatures that you can unlock, so you can like trade your creature out for like a wolf at some point. Like there's like a lion. There's all these different ones that you can like get through some effort, and the spells that you cast are cool. It's a great game. I highly recommend checking it out. Now, I want to talk about the AI of the creatures a little more, because there's a lot in that, but we're actually going to talk about that in the next section. So we'll talk about that as part of the development section of the show. Speaking of which, let's hop on over to that. In talking about the AI in Black and White, I think I actually have a different question than I've heard asked a lot. I think usually what people ask about the AI in Black and White is, how is it so good? Everybody's going, wow, the AI in Black and White is so phenomenal. It's insane. One of the guys who worked on it went on to work for, I think it's DeepMind. He like went into some heavy Google stuff. That's what I've heard. I haven't done independent research into that, but that is what I've heard from multiple sources. Um, yeah, so this AI is really cool, but it is so like rebellious. I think I think the definition of good is very important here. I think whenever everybody talks about the AI in Black and White being so good, it gives this false impression that the AI is obedient, or that it does a good job of understanding what you're requesting of it. That's not the case, in my opinion. In my opinion, the AI in Black and White is good because it is very unpredictable and rebellious, but it's not just random. It feels very real. And that's fascinating to me. Is the AI feels like it is misinterpreting you in a very real way. It feels like you are actually trying to communicate with an animal, and like you're like training it the wrong way, and you're getting confused, and like this there's this whole weird miscommunication thing that happens in there. And I am convinced that that is good AI. Like I think that it is, for this setting, that's really great. I love it. But I just want to be super clear that, in my opinion, the AI does not do exactly what you want it to. It is interesting because it misunderstands you, because it's kind of chaotic, because it's a little bit off. It feels like you're interacting with something that actually has some degree of personality. Now, granted, this is all like an illusion, right? I'm not somebody who believes that AI has like a personality in the way that we think of it, but I I do love the illusion that it creates, because it makes the creatures so interesting. And this is what I think is cool. I think this like illusion of something is a really powerful concept. I think that there's a power in leaving things a little bit rough, like a little bit like I think there was probably a point, anytime you're making something, there's probably a point where you go, okay, how polished do I want this to be? This is not giving everybody the exact experience that I want them to get, right? This is not giving people precisely the impression that I'm trying to give them. And I'm a big believer in leaving some room, leaving some space for interpretation. It's like sometimes, okay, here's a good example. This is much more of like a day-to-day life example of this concept. Sometimes you're having a conversation, or I mean, I do this all the time, where I explain something to someone to an unnecessary extent, right? What's a good example? If somebody was like, hey, here's how you take out the trash, and they tell you, okay, first take one step towards the trash can, then take another until you reach the trash can, and then put your left hand here, put your right hand here, squeeze your fingers this way, pull the can up by using your biceps, and a little bit of like, you might want to put your feet here to help hold the bottom. Like, that's a lot. And inevitably, if you give somebody that much instruction on something, if you give somebody just so much info, they're going to misunderstand more so than if you just say, hey, take out the trash. Because then they're going to do it however they want to do it, and it's going to be great. But if you tell them every single detail, they're going to try to do it that way, and it's going to get frustrating, and it's a mess. This is sort of something from like day-to-day life. This is sort of something that applies within my like teaching experience. You want to give instructions that are just enough information. Um, and I think in a similar way, you want to create games that are just structured enough. You don't want, like those Super Mario Maker levels where it's just an auto level, like it just plays automatically. Like you just press one button and it's an auto scroller. I think that's what they call it, right? You don't want an auto scroller. You're not trying to make an auto scroller with your game. You don't want every single step of the journey to be perfectly laid out in front of them. And then the moment they try to step off the path, it's like, whoa, 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 no, hold on, that's not what we're doing. Get back on the path. And I think, I mean, it's easy to say that for something like story, or for something more linear and direct, like plot, but it's hard to take that mindset and apply it. Maybe it's not hard. Maybe it's just an unfamiliar concept, but it's unfamiliar to take that concept and apply it to gameplay mechanics. And I think something that a few games do beautifully is they take this concept of like player freedom, right? and they give you just the right balance within the gameplay mechanics. And it's hard to do because you have to give more options to players, or you have to design your game from the very bottom up to not restrict certain things. Like, I think Valheim is good at this. I think Minecraft in its original state was good at this. I haven't played much Minecraft since like way back in the day, so I can't speak to. I know that they've added like a bunch of story things and a lot more structure, so I can't speak to its current state. I assume it's still pretty good at it, honestly. Um, I think there are games like Civilization can be pretty good at this. I think there's a lot of games that let you have a pretty good amount of freedom by embracing the fact that things are just a little bit unclear. Things could go this way, could go that way, no way to know, you better experiment, right? Game might respond this way, game might respond that way. It might not even be consistent in its response. You better find out, right? In fact, I think a little bit off track here, but I think that I'm already way off track. I think, uh, but this is a fun idea, so let's go with it for a second. In a game like in like a 4X strategy game, in one of these grand strategy games, one of the things that gets really frustrating is when the AI is either way too predictable or way too unpredictable. But if they always do exactly the same thing and they're really easy to predict, like they respond to your behavior the same way every time, that's an issue because then you can just manipulate the ever living crap out of them. Like, that's no good. In the same way, to tie it back to black and white, if the creature responds to your stuff in exactly the same way every time, it doesn't feel as real. It's an issue because it becomes too easy. Instead, it responds a little bit janky. It responds just a little bit oddly, where you're like, hopefully when I pet it right now, it knows that I'm petting it for casting that spell that helps my villagers and doesn't think that I'm petting it because it's near a building and I want it to smack the building. Like, there are just these weird things that happen based on what it's already learned, right? It's so cool, it's so dynamic, it's so interesting, and it is not 100% clear cut. And I think that is where its strength lies, is that it's not super clean. It's super weird. It's super confusing. It's super complicated. I did have another question written down, which I kind of already covered, which is, how is this game so good despite being so janky? I think that's a big part of why it's so good, is because it's got all these elements that you have to explore and understand and come to grips with. Like, you have to come to grips with being a god, and you're like, oh, this is an unfamiliar state for me. Let's figure out how these controls works. Oops, I just accidentally destroyed people. Oh man, my powers are a bit too much, right? It's like, you're a clumsy god, and that's very funny in a lot of ways. Like, it's a very interesting angle to be a clumsy god in a game. Okay, that's plenty about Black and White. I love that game. It's a good time. I hope that one day it gets a highly accessible release or a spiritual successor that is true enough to the vision to scratch that same itch. I have not seen that yet. Uh, it would take a lot of work, but that would be a beautiful thing. Now, let's talk about my development this past week or so. Oh, one thing that happened, I accidentally double posted my podcast. I usually keep a spare episode. I accidentally posted two in one week. You may have noticed that. I don't know, but enjoy. I'm just going to keep posting every weekend anyway. And I'll at some point I'll record two episodes and put one in the chamber again, just in case of any kind of emergency or whatever, so that I have a backup and we can keep a consistent schedule. But in case you noticed, yeah, I know that happened. Oops. Oh well, I'll just keep going. Okay. Now, as far as my game development, couple really cool things happened this week. I'm very happy with this. Uh, One is a book. I'm going to talk more about that at the end of this, I guess. And the other is, I put in menus and worked on just like fundamental features that every game is supposed to have. And I don't know what it is, but putting in like a pause menu and then a couple sub menus to that pause menu and all this stuff really makes the game feel like it's happening. It's like, oh, this is really happening. This is becoming a game. Um, those took less effort than I thought they would, but still more effort than I initially, like when I first started making the game, I didn't even think about them. But like you got to do that stuff, otherwise it doesn't feel like a game. So working on that, and that's basically like the core stuff I've been thinking about with the game right now. I did some level design. I changed where the camera position is because that is such a huge player in terms of how the game feels. Is how close is your camera, right? Uh, I kind of wish I had decided that earlier, but whatever. We learn lessons as we develop. Now, the other part is this book. I read this book while I listened to the audiobook called Quit by Annie Duke, who's a famous poker player. It is so good and so useful for game development. It is basically a defense of quitting things and an explanation of why it's extremely important to know when to quit something and to create a plan in advance for the situations under which you will quit, creating kill conditions. And it also talks about kill conditions being if this happens, then I quit, or if we reach this point, then I quit. And also about this concept of monkeys and pedestals, which is essentially do the hard do the hard thing first, do the thing that might be impossible first, so that if it is impossible, you can just get out of the project before it takes up a bunch of your resources. So the monkey is training a monkey, and then the pedestal is like you're doing a performance in a town square and you have a monkey standing on a pedestal juggling. So the first thing you want to do is train the monkey because good God, what if you can't train the monkey? There's no point in putting all the hours in making the pedestal. Great concept. Highly recommend the book. Once again, it is called Quit. It's by Annie Duke, phenomenal author. Uh, just fantastic. Well worth the read. Strongly recommend it. From reading it, I have made my own whole new kind of an outline of a development cycle for the next game that I work on because I'm trying to establish a development cycle that allows me to explore a lot of ideas very rapidly and find some degree of success in development without investing years and years and years into one product, because I've seen so many horror stories of people putting years of their life into a game, their first or second game, and then it just completely failing. And I say failing, it makes like a couple $1,000, but that's after that many years, that's a failure, right? That feels like a failure. In some terms, it's a success. Like in some terms, you made money off of this cool creative thing you did, but it depends on your investment in it. So I'm creating a development cycle for myself in which I will be minimally invested in each project that I make while trying to make the best possible game in that time frame. I'm very excited about it. We'll see how it pans out. Um, One last thing before we go to the final section, the repeat section of the podcast. Quick video game release gossipy stuff. I just heard about Age of Wonders 4. I am so excited about that game. Huge fan of that series. Haven't covered it on the show yet, but I'm going to at some point. I've just heard that Age of Wonders 4 is slated for May, and I'm very curious to see how the gameplay comes out on that. I've just started playing a game called Last Epoch, which is amazing. I started playing it as a result of not being 100% satisfied with the beta for Diablo 4. I think the beta for Diablo 4 was better than I expected it to be, but not quite for me. And it's interesting. I still might end up playing that game. I don't know. I'm conflicted on Diablo 4 for sure. Last Epoch, I have been enjoying immensely, even though it is extremely buggy and it is still in beta. It's playable, but it's pretty buggy. If you're into those genres, check it out. If you like games like Civilization, if you like those grand strategy games, if you like what people often call 4X strategy games, check out the Age of Wonders series because every game in that series has been, at the very least, a very good game. There haven't been a lot of Age of Wonders games that absolutely knock it out of the park, but they have been quite good. So I'm excited to see how 4 pans out and whether or not it is the Age of Wonders game I've been looking for. And to be clear, love that series. There's yet to be a game in the series that I don't like. I don't think one has completely killed it for me since like Age of Wonders Shadow Magic or like Age of Wonders 1. Although Planetfall, the recent one, was very good. I enjoyed it a lot. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do there. I don't pre-order. I don't do that whole thing. I'm just going to wait, see how it is, and we'll go in on that. Okay, that's my quick gaming gossip. Let's get into the very last section of this podcast. This is going to be the weirdest, least game specific behavior that I ever provide you with, but I promise you that this is so useful. And that is tuning into your own body and understanding what gives you energy. I have recently had the experience of changing my eating patterns to the point of like what I'm eating in the morning, what I'm eating later in the day, and the energy boost that I've gotten from that has been wild. I've also changed the times that I go to sleep and the times that I wake up and like when I'm getting sunlight and when I'm exercising. That has also changed my energy levels massively. So is very straightforward habit, but it is maybe the most repeatable and the most difficult to establish habit, which is pay attention to your energy levels and find out. Just get really curious, run little experiments, safe experiments. Don't do anything crazy or health, whatever. I'm not a doctor, all that stuff, all those disclaimers. But pay attention to your own body, pay attention to your own feelings and energy levels, and find out what raises them and what lowers them, and then adjust accordingly. That's not specific advice, very intentionally not specific advice, because different things work for different people, and I have no idea what works for anybody other than me. But you can look at like the broad advice and start sampling things that work for the majority of the population based on science or whatever, right? For me, because of whatever has been happening in my life, this has meant that dietary changes have had a massive impact on my morning energy. And then working out early in the day instead of late in the day has impacted my sleep. There's all these cool things that have happened there. And I firmly believe that taking care of your body and your energy levels is a very important baseline habit to support everything else you're doing in your life. Like separate from the game development career stuff, forget all that. Just being able to enjoy what you are doing, you got to have the energy for it. And you got to pay attention to your own energy levels. This is my take on it. I think it's wildly important, and I wanted to mention it, even though it's not that specific to the creative act. I think it is the foundation that we often ignore. That's what I've got for you this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will have another one for you next week, and that's it. That's all I got. Have a great week. Have fun creating stuff, and have fun playing some games, man. I will see you next time. Bye.